All right, picking up right where we left off. So now we are moving on to the region and employee analysis, but we need to copy the data in first. So to do that, I'm going to highlight the entire table, copy, bring it over here, and I'm going to paste special and paste special values, and we'll see why. If I take a look at the price now there's no longer a formula. So pasting as values gets rid of all the formulas and just hard codes the numbers in there. But it also does something funky to dates. So in order to get the dates back to the correct format, we can click the format up here, change it to short date, and then we can copy the format all the way down with our format copier. Just apply that to the whole column, and we are good to go. So before we kind of look at the regions individually, I'm going to show you a quick demo of different ways to kind of visualize the information. So first I'm going to add a filter, and let's say I only wanted to focus on the East data. Then I can click on the filter that I just added, and then when I click on East, it sorts to only those that have the value of East and kind of hides the rest of them. I can also add in the North. If I wanted to just look at the North, I could just look at those. Now, let's say I wanted to figure out how many total sales the North had, only the North though. I could kind of do a sum on just these numbers. But what we're going to do ourselves is use a formula to do that for us. I can also do what's called subtotals. But before I can use the subtotals feature in Excel, I need to sort the data. So if I want to look at the subtotals by region, I need to sort, we'll just go ascending. So I'm sorted by customer region. And now when I highlight my entire table, I can go to the data tab, and then I can go to subtotals. And at each change in customer region, I'm going to use the sum function on the total price. So now, if I scroll back up, it gives me the total for the East. So 4,700. And then it gives me the total for just the North, and so on. And we can also click these things on the left here to kind of collapse groups. So that gives me the East all in a single row by itself, North, South, East, and West. So this is one feature called subtotals, and you can collapse and expand all of them. It also gives you a grand total overall. To get rid of subtotals, all you need to do is go to subtotals and then remove all, and you're back to where you started. All right, next up is a feature that we're going to be using a lot throughout this Excel module, is called an Excel table. So right now the data is just kind of grouped together. They're just kind of placed next to each other, but they're not really connected to each other. That's what we're going to change by making this a table. So if I highlight my entire range and then go to Insert and then Table, Excel tables, just like they were mentioned in the data camp, have a lot of neat features that we're going to be taking advantage of. And they should input something like this. So the first thing that we can do is going to be to kind of recreate that filter that we did, but we're going to do it in the form of a slicer. So a slicer is just kind of an interactive way to filter. So if I insert this slicer and I click on the East, now my table filters to only the East. If I want to click on more than one region, I can click on the multi-select, and now I have two regions in there. And I can clear them all, and it shows all of the data values. We can also get a totals row. So if I right-click anywhere in my table, and go to table and then totals row, it adds in a total row. And we can also change which columns are summarized and how they are summarized. So this one is summarized with the sum. We could also get, we'll say, the average unit sales and any other summary measure that we wanted to. All right, so now that we have covered tables, we are ready to kind of get this breakdown, calculate it ourselves. So we're going to calculate those subtotals that we showed earlier, but using formulas directly with the data. So to get the total sales, we're going to be using the formula sum if, and there's 3 arguments. The first one is the range. So that is going to be what it is checking. So if this cell here, so if the north, that's going to be a criteria. So we want this to be our region. One advantage of tables is that it makes formulas really readable. Take a look here, it says table 1, and then it gives you the column name. So much easier than a bunch of cell references like before. So if this column is equal to the column right next to it, which is north, I'm going to sum the unit sales. Click enter on that. And this is our formula. So it's taking all of the rows that correspond to north and adding those. That's what sum if is doing. Next, we can do the same thing, but for total sales. So now I'm going to do a sum if. My region is still going to be, my range is still going to be the region. My criteria is still going to be the north. And then the sum range is still going to be total price. And there we go. And now, just like we copied formulas earlier, I need to make this an absolute reference. I'm just going to be copying it down. So I really only need a $sign in front of the column letter. We can do that here as well. So you can type in the $sign, or if you cycle through F4 a few times, it will go through the different references. Now, when I fill those down, these are still working with the correct table references, right? That's the advantage of using table references. And it's using the correct criteria as well. So that is our frequency distribution that we created by hand. One way that we can visualize this now with a plot is with a bar graph. So we're just going to do it for the unit sales. So if I go to insert and this first one here, 2D column, bar graph. Bar graphs are typically reserved for count data, which is exactly what unit sales is. So this shows exactly a picture version of what our table is showing. But let's say that your boss also wants you to visualize the total sales as well. So why not just make 2 bar graphs? Well, let's try it, and then we'll kind of talk about what needs to be corrected with that. So I'm going to highlight my entire table, and I'll do insert, the same chart. So Excel, if you do the recommended charts, it gives you some options. But if we do what we originally wanted, it should give us what it recommended. So Excel is pretty smart. So if we take a look at this chart now, a few things wrong. First is bar graphs, like I said, are typically reserved for count data, whereas total sales isn't necessarily, right, how many times something occurred, right? It's kind of like a total, like a sum. So maybe slightly misusing a bar graph in that aspect. And also, it's putting these on the exact same scale. So my sales in count are in blue, on the same set of axes as the total sales in dollars, right? Those units are different and they make it seem that they're the same because they're plotted this way. So because of that, this plot is hard to read. And how it's grouped now, it's looking at the North region and it's comparing the total sales in orange to the unit sales. So it's making that group-wise comparison within the regions. We can switch that. So maybe I want the switch row column here at the top. Maybe I want to compare the regions within the two different variables, right? Either way, this is still not the best graph because they're on the same axes. So let's do some things to fix this. So I'm going to copy this plot just to give us a starting point. And let's start modifying this to give us a better, more accurate and clear visual. So the first thing that I'm going to do is give it a nicer title. So this is ultimately looking at region sales. And I'm going to remove the grid lines. So by clicking on them, right click, delete, gets rid of those grid lines. And I'm also going to get rid of this axis as well. We're going to be using some data labels that'll make the numbers clear. So data labels, the way to add those is you can do it two ways. If you just click on a single series, so a series refers to kind of like a variable in Excel. If you just click on a single series and add data labels, it'll just add it to one of them. If you go in the chart design and do add chart element data labels, and then we can do outside end, it adds it to all of them. So now I have all my data labels. Make it a little bit bigger. The next thing that I'm going to do is to differentiate these two variables. I'm going to actually change the chart type of total sales. So if I right click my total sales, change chart type, I'm going to make it a line plot with markers. So I need to get all of the total sales. So let me switch row column. So before it just highlighted the, there we go. So now I have, before it just did the North region, now I have all the total sales. I want to change the chart type for this to a line with markers. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that the line kind of implies that these are connected. They are not. So what we can do is format this data series. So if I click on the line, right click, format data series, that brings up this menu. And I'm going to get rid of the line. Right now there's just a marker at the top, but I also want to make the marker stand out a bit more. So I am going to click on the marker tab here. We'll go to marker options, and I want it to be a kind of a thick dash. So I will change it to a dash, and I'll increase the size a bit. And then the next thing that I want to do is change how the data label looks. So if I right click on the data labels and format data labels, I can put the number a few different positions so I can center it. That doesn't make much sense. I'm going to put it above it. And I'm also going to move the data labels for the bars inside of the bar. So that way it's a little bit separated from the total sales label. So we're starting to get somewhere. Few more cosmetic changes. So one thing that I can do is make things stand out a bit more. So let's go ahead and bold my data labels. And then I want the bars to be more of a neutral color. So I want to change the color of the bars to be just a simple gray. So very neutral color. And then as a result, I can make the labels here, just to make them stand out a bit more. I can make the font white. All right, almost to a beautiful plot. Next thing that I can do is see how it's really far apart. So I can make these closer together by right-click, Format Data Series, and I can decrease the gap width. So we'll just try 100. And make those a bit tighter in there. So let's even go to 50. That looks a little bit better. And we can even increase the font size a little bit. Next thing is I want to make it really easy for the reader to know what these labels represent. So rather than trying to look at what this number is, then come back down to the legend, right? I want to put the legend kind of right on top of the points. The way I'm going to do that is by formatting a single data label. So if I double click on the point that I want, so notice when you click once, it highlights all of them. When you double click or click a second time, it highlights just the single one. If I right click, format data point, format data label is the option that I want. You can change what is displayed. So right now it's just the value. I can get rid of that. Add data label. Sorry, did one step too many. But I want to format data label. So the value, but I also want to show the series name, total sales. And then the separator, I don't need a comma, so it gets rid of the comma that was right there. So now I know immediately these numbers above represent the total sales. I can do the same thing with the very first in the bar. So now I know those are unit sales. And then this legend is now redundant, so I can delete that. And take a look at our finished plot. So look at this one. Same axes, hard to read, not much information that we can glean. Whereas this one, very clear, much more organized, and much more effective. We can also do two last things, right? I can bold, make those labels stand out a bit more. And you can even change this line here to make it darker. And then we'll increase the width a bit. There we go. So this plot is much better, much more informative. And this is our first kind of exploration into how to design plots. So we're going to be discussing this a lot more in future videos. So your exercise for this video is to recreate the frequency table using those sum-if formulas, but for the employees, and then to visualize the table that you'll make with a pie chart, and then try a few of the different quick layouts to add more features to make the plot readable, right? Make it more informative, and then compare and contrast. Just kind of think about it, the bar graph and the pie chart. Which one's better? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages of each? All right, that is it for this video. I will see you in the next one.